Welcome to Whispers from Within. I'm your host, Katja Aurora, intuitive healer, space holder, and inner wisdom guide, here to share insights from a lifetime of walking between worlds. This is the sacred space where intuition leads, the soul speaks, and ancient wisdom meets everyday life. In each episode, we explore energy, healing, and the human experience, guided by presence, truth, and laughter. Let's listen in and remember who we really are.
I stand in the light of truth and love, whole, sovereign, and free. Only what serves the highest good may enter this space, all else dissolves into light. Every word shared here is carried in clarity, purity, and love. May each listener hear exactly what serves their highest evolution in perfect timing and perfect resonance. This space is sealed, protected, and blessed, and so it is.
Welcome back. And today I'd like to talk about relationships. They have been profound in my life, and I have noticed that, or I have realized until now, that everything in this existence with the human body in this life, stays here when you leave this body. But the relationships that you create and that you foster and that you nourish, they will stay with you even beyond this lifetime. So it is worth looking at how you relate in your life, first of all, with yourself, and then with everybody around you. And I'm saying this as I have mentioned in my previous podcast that I've come into this lifetime not quite knowing how to relate properly. I was very shy as a child. I didn't know how to do relationships. I had good relationships with both of my parents, more so with my mom than my dad. But and they were very loving to me as well. But obviously, when you grow up, you take a lot of their imprinting on, and so did I. So I had trouble making connections, deep connections with um, children in my own age. I always felt like I was older. I didn't quite understand my own age group very well. I was a very serious child. I didn't laugh a lot. I did have fun. Um, I did have times when I enjoyed myself, but I didn't really. I was not a light-hearted child, I would say. I was always taking in consideration the consequences of my actions most of the time, not all the time, because when you're a child, you don't do this all the time. But I did that from quite early on. And also being the oldest sister, I naturally had this tendency of taking care of my little sister and watching out and also paving the path, kind of trying out limits and limitations set by my parents. I had to, overcome the boundaries that was set for me there, and that felt hard at times, as it does for every firstborn. And when the second one comes along, or the third one, or the fourth one, you're kind of the one that has to be the sensible one, and that is imprinted in you in a way. And so, yeah, that was the case with me as well. But I realized when I remembered when my healer opened up in me, and when I began to discover myself more closely and my history as well, my previous lifetimes, and this becomes a bit more spiritual now. I remembered lifetimes at a certain point when it became important for me to do so. And one of my latest lifetimes was a lifetime in Ireland, which is why I went back there to reawaken to that truth. really interesting, and there's no coincidence. It's all planned, it's all laid out for you so that you can discover yourself. And for me, I went back to Ireland and began to study shamanism. And in that very first session that I started off on my journey to become a shaman or learn how to do shamanic practices, I sat there and we were meditating and going into a journey to meet our spirit animal. And I sat there and thought, oh, I know all this. Why am I even here? I know all this. It's so familiar to me. And that was my first remembering, oh, I've done this before. This is not new. And yet I still needed to walk the path because that would help me to remember who I really was. And I didn't initially remember all the ins and outs of my past lifetimes. They came in stages and just as they needed to come in. But going back to the relationship, so I eventually remembered that I had a lifetime in Ireland and I got bits of it over a period of time. So I didn't have the whole realization of that lifetime in one go. It came to me in pieces because it would have been too much for me to remember it all in one go. That lifetime, I was English and I had emigrated to Ireland, to Northern Ireland. I was married to a red coat, an English red coat soldier, and we were married very early on. I didn't have a family to speak of, and he was my one and only. He was my absolute world. And the scene that I remembered first from this lifetime was the scene where we were at the harbour in Londonderry. That's where we were stationed, where we were living. And he was shot, and I held him in my arms as he was dying. That was my memory of that lifetime. And even when I speak about it now, I see that very vividly as a memory. And that was the beginning of a very well, it was part of a very long lifetime in Ireland. It was in the 1800s. It was 17 something something, 1790 something, and I was still very young then when he died. We had been married for a couple of years, so very early as well. It was very early in the marriage, and because he was my one and only, um, a big piece of me died that day. And at the time, I didn't know I was pregnant, and I got the child, and I had no means to earn money. That wasn't, a woman wouldn't work at that time. So I did not have any means of earning anything. I was part of a community with a priest, and the priest was not a very nice man. He took advantage. And so I um, was at the mercy of that community to a degree, and the church was my only way to survive. So I stayed there. The child um, only lived up until 5 years old and then had a disease to die on me as well. And at that point, I cursed God. I cursed him for taking the two most precious beings in my life. And I became very bitter. I kind of shut religion out of my life. I didn't believe in anything anymore. The only thing that gave me a little bit of joy in that lifetime was patchwork. And so I created patchwork in that life. And it was so interesting on my journey to rediscover myself. It was an island when I traveled Ireland with a friend of mine, and I knew I had a lifetime in Londonderry, and I knew I had to go back there to discover another piece of it and become whole to a better degree. And I had the vision of this church that I went in and was part of a community around the church. That the vision of the church, I knew I had to go to Londonderry and look for that church. I didn't know what the church was called or anything, but I knew I had to find it. So my friend and I went on a pilgrimage through Ireland, discovering many different spiritual sites, including Newgrange and other places in Ireland. So we had a whole tour of the different areas in Ireland, which was magical as well. It felt like we were on the road for ages, but it was only, I think, 3 days or something, or 4 days that we traveled. And in that time, we went to Londonderry, and I had that vision in my mind, and I asked for support. I asked my guides for support to find that church and help us be guided to that church. And so we walked the streets of Londonderry, not knowing where we were going to go. I just knew it was a church, and I asked around to find the church, and I explained how it looked, and we magically, and I don't know to this day how this happened, but we magically went up a road and we found the church. And I looked at the gate and I looked at the church. In my vision, the church was standing by itself. There was a field around it. There was no buildings around the church. It was on a field. So it wasn't closely built up or anything. But when we found the church, it was in the middle of buildings all around it, but the entrance to the church was the same. So the gate and the courtyard of the church and the church itself looked exactly like I had it in my vision. And so I remembered, and it was profound. That moment when I saw that this was the very first time that the vision that I had seen, I saw in real life, and that was profound. So I saw the church, and it was open on the day that we visited. And I went into the church and I saw the patchwork hanging up inside. And I knew intrinsically, I knew inside of me that some of these pieces were my pieces. Some of these pieces that hang on the wall in that church, I had created in that lifetime. And memories came back, and I'm tearful now speaking about it because it was such a hard lifetime for me to live. I I think I lived up until 70 something in that lifetime. That was very old in that lifetime. And it was very hard for me to live this. And I closed myself off from relationships. So I didn't have relationships that meant anything to me from when my child died onwards. So, and that was the lifetime that I believed to be the last lifetime before I came into this one. And so the beginning of my lifetime here now was still influenced by me having had this distrust in people because I wasn't treated very well from the priest in that lifetime. I didn't know how to relate, and I didn't believe that God was on my side. So I had to learn to trust again. I had to learn to open up, and that it's safe to have relationships and what it means to have relationships. And I knew I could have deep relationships. I had dreams about relationships in my early childhood that showed me what it means to trust, and that it can work, and that it's worth trying it. And so it was a discovery journey of me um, getting back into relating in this lifetime, but it was very hard at the beginning. I did not know how to relate in my early stages of life. My closest relationships was with my parents, and oddly, I was a quiet child. I had a temperament, so I had outbursts of anger and something like that sometimes, but otherwise I was very quiet most of the time and very introspective. I was an introvert, and yeah, just had epiphanies on my own, not speaking to many people. And I had many interests. I was, yeah, so interested in so many different things, and they all took me into different paths. And my close relationships at that age were the teachers. So I connected with people that could see more in me than I could see in myself. And anybody that supported me, I felt safe with and I opened up to. And I learned a lot from those relationships because they believed in me. And that gave me hope. So I was more connected with teachers than the students in my own age group. And that obviously made me more of a stranger in my own age group because who wants to be friends with somebody that is friends with the teacher? So it estranged me to all the people in my age. Um, but it was more fitting to me. I had more in common with the teachers than I had with the pupils. So I felt safe with that, and I felt I could trust them more than the ones in my age group who didn't know who they were, really, because I didn't know who I was. So I had an anchor in those early relationships with adults that kind of helped me to find myself. And then I I think the first real friendship I had was when I went to university. So I had good relationships in my later school years with the boys in my class. Um, I had deep conversations with them, but again, I didn't feel safe enough to open up fully there. But I had good relationships with them, so there was an understanding there. There was a respect there, and I think I felt respected because I had good grades in school. Like they could see I was intelligent, and that kind of helped me to have good relationships because they kind of thought highly of me. So I've earned it in a way, and that's what it felt like. But it wasn't feeling safe enough for me to really fully open up, and there was no real deep connection. I did not have a best friend at all in the early stages of my life until the time that I started university. And in university, I had my first um, relationships that I call memory relationships. So they were relationships where I knew the person from before. So I met them and I instinctively knew that I knew them from before. So they were friends that I had in other lifetimes that felt really familiar to me and really close so that I could open up to them very easily. And there were several of them that opened up for me in that university time, and they were not all my peers in university, but there were other friends that I got to know in where we had practical um, phases. Like we were sent to organizations to have a practical semester or something. Like just getting to know how how to use the knowledge we've gained in theory in the practical world, even though there was no connection. Like all the theory couldn't be used in the practical world. But we learned other practical things in those times, and there were people that I met there in those organizations that I knew, that it really deeply resonated in my soul, that I kind of remembered having spent time with before. And at that time, I didn't know about past lifetimes, but I felt really deeply connected to those people, and some of which I'm still connected to now. So this was the time I opened up to relationships, and I learned what it was feeling like to trust again. And I did trust, and I did explore what it felt like to, yeah, to go into those relationships and to keep them and not to lose myself or change myself to keep them. So, now there was one relationship though that's just coming up that I need to share as well. So one relationship, I had a teenage love relationship with a guy, and that was profound as well. We were together 8 years, from the age of 17 onwards. I think he was 18 when we met. And he was in Berlin, and I was in northern, on the outskirts of Berlin. I guess I told you on my last podcast. And we could only meet at the weekend because he lived in Berlin, and I wasn't allowed to see him in the week because I was still going to school. So my parents only allowed me to see him at the weekends. So, and the reason I'm mentioning that now is because when we had this, this relationship, I couldn't see him in the week, and every single week on a Thursday night, I had something like a nervous breakdown because I couldn't see him for another day before the weekend. It felt such a long time for me. Those 5 days I had to wait until I could see him again. It was such an intense yearning to see him. It obviously was the first love. It was very intense. That was quite a profound relationship to me as well. We felt quite close. We felt quite connected. He got a side out of me that I hadn't known before, so it was really enlivening as well. It was really intense in the beginning. And so I had this breakdown every Thursday night, like crying my eyes out and finding it utterly unfair from my parents to not be able to see him in the week, and having to wait for each weekend to come along so I could see him again. I suffered tremendously in that time, and I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't make sense of it either, that it was such a big deal for me not to see him for 5 days. I mean, it was only 5 days, but it was so painful in me. It was so painful. And it was that way because this was reminding me of my loss in this Irish life. The love that I felt for this boy was reminding me of my love to this man in this other lifetime that I had lost being shot. So I relived the yearning for my love every Thursday night. And I didn't know it was that. I didn't know that that was a remembering of my past lifetime. And it was really difficult to manage because everybody thought I was crazy, losing myself, or having this mental breakdown every Thursday night. Nobody could understand that. And I couldn't either. I didn't understand myself. But then when I went into the shame and remembering of myself, I remembered this Irish lifetime, and suddenly this made sense to me. It suddenly made sense to me that I had these breakdowns, and it just clicked. So I understood myself more, and I understood how profound past lives can be, and how intricately everything is woven together, so that in this lifetime now we remember traumas that have happened in another lifetime, so we can heal them, we can make sense of them, we can make amends in our system so that we can move on free of the traumas. And I want to mention here something else that I find really important, and I get asked a lot about in my practice as well. Please know that you do not have to live with trauma. It is not about managing to live with your trauma. That's a myth. You can totally and completely change the trauma response in your body. You can release the trauma. And this is what my work is about. You can absolutely heal trauma so that it doesn't impact you anymore. And this is what I do in my work. So trauma really is a knot of energy in your system. When you live through trauma, and it can be anything from childhood memories, any situation where your system was overwhelmed by what happened, where you couldn't cope with what happened. It doesn't matter why, or you know you know what the circumstances were. You were just simply overwhelmed with what was presenting itself. And so then your system remembers all the little details, the smells, the sounds, the anything that happened around this situation, including the situation itself, and it stores it as a memory in your system. And it becomes a knot, an energetic knot in your system. And that knot is a magnet to draw in similar scenarios in your life because it strives to be released again. So it becomes a magnet to draw in similar sort of scenarios, which is why you recreate similar scenarios in your life to remind you that that trauma wants to be released. So you're poked over and over and over again and triggered in those spots, in those painful places, because the trauma reminds you that it needs to be healed. And when we heal the trauma, what happens is that you release the knot in your system. So it completely releases out of your system. You keep the memory of what's happening, of what's happened to you. So you can still remember everything, but it loses the sting. It loses the trigger. It loses the emotional response that happened, or the imprint of the hurt in your system is released, so that this knot is being released and no longer needs to draw in similar case scenarios in your life. So you're free then to live your life free of this trauma. And that is a possibility, a real possibility. And I've seen it many times. So if you have trauma where you know you're holding something and you've until now just managed it and didn't know that you could release it, please know you can release it. You just need to know how. It is an absolute possibility, and it's so freeing when you do. So I'm saying that because this trauma of me losing my husband in that lifetime was so deep within me that I then had this response in my early teens when I had my first relationship and cried my eyes out every Thursday night. And I could release it once I knew that that was connected. I learned how to release it. And now I can talk about it, and I know that that happened to me. It's a memory, fresh as ever, but it doesn't hold the sting anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. I know about it, and it was shaping me. It's in me, but it doesn't hold me back in opening my heart to another love, or it does no longer have a grip on me like it did then. So that is my story on relationship so far. I want to throw in one more thing because I often get to explain that in my sessions as well. Now, when we relate to other people in this lifetime, everything around you, everything you see as a relation in your lifetime, no matter how it presents itself to you, everything you see on the outside is only ever a reflection to your inside. It's a mirror. It might not be a direct mirror. There's different sorts of mirrors. There's different kinds of mirrors. So there's sometimes inverted mirrors, sometimes, the mirror of your greatest fear, or there's different kinds, but it's always a mirror. It's always got to do something with you if it triggers you. So if it creates an emotional response in you of some sort that doesn't feel good, that then means there's a mirror in it for you to see. And that also always holds a gift in it. So knowing that anything that happens to you on the outside has something to do with you on the inside is really profound, because you then can choose to take it into your own hands and release the internal, whatever it is that you're holding on to then change the external. Because once you change the trigger inside, you change your frequency, and then the outside has to change as well. So it is in your own hands how people react to you, what you attract into your life in terms of a relationship. And the state of your relationships in this lifetime is a state of your relationship to yourself. It's always a mirror. So when you learn to become your own best friend, when you learn to love yourself, and I know for some that sounds really weird and you don't even know where to start with that. It is a journey. You can't learn this overnight. And we're certainly not geared or not programmed in this lifetime to do this. So we have to learn it. Um, but it's a journey well worth exploring, because when you can become your own best friend, you're learning to relate on the outside as well. You will have the compassion with the people around you, and you will relate on a completely different level as well. So it's definitely worth doing the inner work so that the outer world around you mirrors that. It's definitely worth doing that. And I can say that from a place where most of my relationships on the outside now are reflecting my inner work. And I'm really, really proud about what I've created in my life, and then the people that are around me, that I have deep relationships with, that go beyond anything I've ever thought possible, coming from a place that was like not knowing how to relate really in the early stages. It's completely changed now. So it's worth doing that exploration and going deeper into it. And it's worth exploring how to be with yourself and how to love yourself, because that's where it's at. The deeper you can love yourself, the deeper you are able to love other people. And really, that's what we want to do. And that's what we can take with us. So when we lose this body, when we come out of this body, the relationships we forge and the love bonds we create and we deepen in this lifetime, they will not get lost. You take them with you. And you might even meet those relationships, those people, those souls back in the next life. And this is why it's so worth looking into that, because it just deepens your experiences on so many levels, and it's so worth it. And with that, I leave you for today. I hope that you had some epiphanies, maybe some memories, maybe some, insights into your own understanding of what relationships are for you. And I speak to you soon. Bye bye. Thank you for joining me on this journey inwards. May the whispers you heard today echo into your daily life, gently guiding, healing, and reminding you of who you truly are. If this episode stirred something in your heart, I invite you to follow, share, or leave a review. It helps the medicine reach those who need it most. And if you feel called to go deeper, connect with me. Until next time, stay rooted, stay open, and keep listening to the whispers from within.